Welcome to the Cash Car Convert Podcast, episode number 29.
You're listening to the Cash Car Convert Podcast with James Kinson.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Cash Car Convert Podcast. My name is James Kinson and I am the Cash Car Convert. And this is the podcast where cash cars are cool and auto debt is dangerous to your financial future. I'm very excited today. I just read a book a couple of weeks ago, and I was really excited about the book, and I reached out to the author, and much to my surprise, he agreed to be on my show straight away. I didn't have to wait months or anything like that, so I'm very pleased. So today, I have with us a gentleman who's a certified public accountant, financial planner, president of Seraphis & Company, and CEO of the Rich Habits Institute. He is passionate about personal finance. He trains businesses, individuals, and students how to be financially successful through his Rich Habits educational programs. He has authored several books, including his #1 Amazon best-selling personal finance book, Rich Habits. He has shared his insights on various network and cable television programs, such as CBS Nightly News, Larry Kane's Voice of Reason, Yahoo Financially Fit TV, The Dawn Show, and many others. He's also been on nationally syndicated radio shows such as Dave Ramsey, Marketplace Money, and WABC, where Tom has shared his research with their listeners. He's also been featured in numerous print and internet publications such as Success Magazine, Kiplinger's Magazine, CNN, MSN Money, and the Huffington Post, and now even the Cash Car Convert Podcast. Please welcome Tom Corley to the show. Tom, welcome to the Cash Car Convert Podcast.
Hi, James. Thanks for having me on your program.
Yeah, I'm really thrilled to have you on. So this is a cash car show, so I'm all about cars and that sort of thing. I want to start the interview off, as I do with all my guests, and I ask them, what was their first car, how did they get it, and how did it work out for them?
Yeah, it was a 72 Cutlass, and when we got it, it had a tree or a mini tree growing out of the engine. So my brother Joe and I took it apart, rebuilt the engine. Joe was really good with the engine. I was really good with the periphery stuff, like it had power windows, which was amazing for a car that old. And it had the brakes were disc brakes in the front and drums in the back. And so I learned how to change brakes from a book I got out of the library, Chilton's. And so, I learned everything I know about cars. I learned from that Cutlass. That's
fantastic. And I've had a few people on that have talked about building their own cars. I had Dan Miller on. I just had another gentleman on. His episode will air the week ahead of yours. And same thing. They bought cars and had to rebuild the engines. So that's a great way to learn. I didn't learn that way. I kind of wish I had, but I had to learn things more the hard way, as engines didn't work for me. So I went to the School of Hard Knocks there. So Tom, I really love your book, Rich Habits, and I think there's so much good information in there. But before we dive in and start talking to some of the things that drove you to write the book and things in the book, I wanted to circle back and talk about your own upbringing, how you learned about finances. What did you learn from your parents about finances, and kind of where did you get your sense of finances growing up?
Yeah, well, I grew up in a wealthy family, and I guess I was in the third grade at about age 9 when my dad's warehouse burned down. It was just random bad luck. And he spent the next almost 2 years in court trying to get some of the money back from insurance companies, from people that owed him money, and he lost. He lost every battle, so overnight we literally became poor. We had nothing. I even remember in the 5th grade, a bunch of nuns. My dad was a big. He was a big contributor to our grammar school, not only in money but also in time. He helped raise hundreds of thousands of dollars for them, And so what was great was when we were in a time of need, they came to our rescue, and they brought over food, they brought over clothes, they brought over all sorts of things. They said, don't worry about the tuition. It's not important. And so all these, it's one of the rich habits I learned from my dad. There weren't many, but it was building valuable relationships. He had just the most valuable relationships, and that helped drag him out of the abyss of poverty. And he ended up retiring, selling his home, and he had almost $1 million in the bank when he retired. Wow.
That's really something, because, that's the kind of thing that can really break somebody, break their spirit. And so sometimes people don't bounce back from that. So that's an incredibly positive story about your father's ability to bounce back and his ability to create relationships and really, for those listening, how valuable those relationships can be. And as you mentioned there, Tom, it is one of the rich habits you talk about in the book. So why don't we talk about that? What are some of the habits that separate the rich from the poor? Just give us kind of the top few there that you think are relevant, because I know you have lots and lots of habits out there.
Sure. I think one of the most important rich habits was the one I found on self-education. When it came to reading, wealthy people, they were voracious readers. And it wasn't just reading for entertainment. In fact, only 11% of them actually read for entertainment. They read history, self-help, biographies of successful people. They read educational material. They read current events. In fact, 88% of the wealthy in my study, James, they read 30 minutes, at a minimum 30 minutes a day. And what's incredible about that is when you compare it to the poor people in my study, and only 2% said that they engaged in that activity, reading really 30 minutes a day for education, career, or self-improvement. If the poor people did read, it was primarily for entertainment. In fact, 79% of them who did read for entertainment. So there was a big discrepancy between the rich and poor in the reading. And the reading is important because when you increase your knowledge base, it helps you see more opportunities. The way I like to describe it is it's like if you can imagine yourself standing somewhere and you see trees. And the trees are a metaphor for opportunities. You see a hill to the side, you start climbing the hill, and as you get higher up the hill, which is a metaphor for reading, you see that there are more trees. And when you get to the top, you see that there's a forest of opportunities. Well, that's what reading does, is it gives you that knowledge base so that you could see a forest of opportunities that are out there that you just don't see on a day-to-day basis. So I think that this self-improvement, the daily self-improvement through reading, is important. The other thing is relationship building. I mentioned it in the beginning of the program. Wealthy people, they look at their relationships as if they're gold. One of the wealthy individuals in my study said, Tom, if I decide that I'm going to build a relationship with you, I look at you as if you're a little sapling, and it's my job to grow you into a redwood, but during my lifetime. The other thing that they mentioned was that they looked, and I called it rich relationships versus poverty relationships. They looked at their relationships and they tried to surround themselves with other successful, wealthy individuals. This is, James, by the way, one of the reasons why wealthy people join golf clubs and country clubs. It's not just so that the rich can play. Their purpose in doing that is so that they could be around people to do business with. And in fact, I just finished an article that I collaborated with a woman who is a writer for The Street, and she wanted to know about my country club data. And what was interesting was that the individuals who joined country clubs, the wealthy who joined country clubs said that business use was a major factor in joining the club. So It's building these relationships are so critical. Communication skills are important in building relationships. I uncovered a couple of strategies: the hello call, the happy birthday call, the life event call. These are ways that wealthy people stay in touch with their relationships. They call them on their birthdays. They call them just to say hello. And the hello call, James, is like a reconnaissance mission. They're out to gather information on their contacts, because the more information they gather on their contacts, it gives them more of an ability to perhaps help them in some way in whatever their skill sets are. And then the life event call is like, putting your relationship tree on steroids, because when you make that life event call, which could be a wedding, a birth, or any number of things, it really grows the relationship more in a personal level. So those are 3 really important rich habits.
Wow, those are really good. And the reading, I've always heard, not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers, and it sounds like that's certainly true based on the information that you found as well. And I think the same thing about the relationships. I think a lot of the successful people, and we're not even just talking purely in terms of finances, but are the people who are able to connect other people and to build those relationships. So I think those are some really interesting facts. And when I peel them back and think about them, they're not surprising, but are very interesting. And I do. I do know I went a couple of years ago and I read 36 books in 1 year. They were all, self-improvement. And I know how much better a year I had when I was doing that. And I know that's something that really helped me. So I'm encouraged to hear that's one of the good habits. And I just need to get a little bit more back into the practice of doing that.
Yeah, it's very important. In fact, you mentioned you read 36 books, which is about 3 books a month. The wealthy, on average, read 2 or more educational type books, career related books a month, 85%, and and only 15% of the poor actually admitted had that rich habit. So there's a I've been on a lot of these interviews, and some of these, especially the national interviews, they try and drag me into a correlation argument. But it's more a cause and effect argument, these rich habits, not a correlation. There's correlations with my data to wealth and to poverty, but the real thing is there's a cause and effect associated with these 10 rich habits, which are, by the way, keystone habits. And keystone habits are unique in that they overpower ordinary everyday habits. For example, if you decided that you wanted to lose some weight and engaged in some aerobic activity, and if you did that for, say, a month or 2, and you lost a little bit of weight, or very often what happens is somebody that you know in your circle will say, hey, James, you look pretty good. You lost weight. You're looking great. And that just stokes the ego, which is an emotion. And these keystone habits are intended to trigger emotions. Once it triggers an emotion, it gets locked in by the brain as a habit. So that's one of the fundamental keys. So then you go back and your ego's stroked, your emotion is high, and so you decide to work out a little bit more. You decide to cut back on your eating. You might smoke cigarettes, so you might cut back on your smoking. You might eat too much junk food. So you do all of these. This rich habit, this keystone habit, starts to eat away at all these ordinary habits that you have, and that's important because what a lot of people don't understand is, and you probably know this better than a lot of people because you read the Duhigg's book on the power of habits, and in that book he talks about how habits really never go away, but they can be overcome by other habits. And that I found is the truth in my research. These keystone habits can overwhelm ordinary habits and transform you in a way that doesn't require willpower.
Right, and you're right. I have read the book, and I've mentioned keystone habits before on this podcast, so people are somewhat familiar with the idea. But I have to admit, I didn't realize that the 10 habits that you list are in fact all keystone habits. So that's a really interesting fact to me. And for those who've listened to this podcast and taken the opportunity to read Mr. Duhigg's book, I think they'll feel the same. So, Tom, let's step back a bit. And what inspired you to write Rich Habits?
Well, I had just taken over as president of my CPA firm in 2004, and I don't think I was there for really more than 6 months when a small business client demanded to meet with me, and we met late one night. He was in a panic. He had been a client of ours for a while, and his bank had just pulled his line of credit. He wasn't going to make payroll, so he came to me to see if the new guy in town could help him secure a line of credit. And I told him there's no possible way, because it takes building a relationship with a banker, and I can't just turn you into a banking client overnight. With my banking relationships, they'd want to get to know you. Anyway, so he broke down and started crying, and he was a big guy. And he just looked at me and he said, "Tom, what am I doing wrong? What are your successful, wealthy clients doing that I'm not doing?" And the emotion that was behind, that his question really stayed with me. And I found myself starting to do some basic research. And this evolved into a 5-year study where I asked 233 people and 128 poor people, 233 rich people and 128 poor people, a very broad-based 20-question list, a list of 20 questions, and then I just started gathering all this information really over a 4-year period and probably another 15 months of analysis, and then I broke it down into 2 groups, and then I started comparing the common activities or common traits that I extracted from my research, and when I was done, I remember it was like an epiphany to me. I said, "My God, there's a direct relationship between your habits and your financial condition in life." And so I started doing, I put together the Rich Habits training program for clients and for anybody really. And I went into schools. I think I've spoken to over 2,000 high school students and college students, and shared with them the habits. I really didn't decide to write the book until 2 things happened. One was one of the individuals in my training learning sessions was a very successful property and casualty insurance guy, and he was trying to figure out, he wanted to increase his life insurance commissions, a new line of business for them, by $100,000, and he could never get past 30 or 40,000 in all the years that he'd been trying. So he came to my learning session because it was focused just on goals, and I explained in the learning session how a wish is not a goal and a goal is not a wish. A goal is only a goal when it has 2 things. One is 100% achievability, and the second thing is there has to be some physical activity associated with the goal. If it has those 2 things, it's a goal. Otherwise, it's just a wish. So we ended up taking his $100,000 wish, and I broke it down into a goal with him, which was to make 10 additional telemarketing phone calls a day. I asked him if he could do it. Was it achievable? And he said, "Yeah, no problem." And he started doing that, James. And he blew past his 100,000, and within 6 months, he finished the year close to 300,000. And the second thing that happened was I used the hello call and the life event call to make an additional $60,000 in what really amounted to about 3 or 4 hours worth of work. That's when I said, "My gosh, I have to write a book about this. This stuff is just I got to get it out there. This is too incredible just to keep to myself and to my clients."
Wow. Well, I'm really glad you did. I like I said, I found it a really fascinating book, and it just, it really resonated with me, and it confirmed a lot of the things that I already knew, because I know when I get up early, when I exercise, when I'm reading nonfiction books, when I'm turning off the television, that I'm more productive, that I have more clarity around my vision and reaching out for my goals and all those kinds of things. So, I'm very happy you wrote it, and it confirmed a lot of the things that I sort of intuitively knew, but it's nice to have the numbers behind it. I do have another question on the way you came about the book. Rather than just writing it as kind of here's the numbers and facts and figures, you wove it into a story, and I found that very fascinating. I would call it a parable. Right. And what was the rationale for that? Because I enjoyed that.
I'm glad you asked that question, because I don't get asked that question a lot, and there's a story behind that. When I originally, because I'm an accountant and I love numbers. I love to look at numbers and stats. They tell the story to me. So when I originally wrote Rich Habits, I spent 6 months working on a manuscript that really read like The Millionaire Next Door. I don't know if you ever read that book, but it's not an easy read because he throws out a lot of statistics and data and research that's in the book. And I thought, well, that's going to be my template, because I want to get this research out there. I sent it to my manuscript. Before I sent it anywhere, I sent it to someone who's very wealthy and very smart. And I asked them to take a look at it and let me know what they thought. And they called me up, and he said, look, Tom, he said, this is a great book if you're teaching a college course. But who's your target audience here? Who do you really want this to benefit? And I said, well, I want poor people to benefit from this. I empathize with them because I went through it. They're the ones that I really want to read this book. And he said, well, they're not going to read a 350-page book with charts and graphs and statistics in it. So I threw out the manuscript when he sent me a copy of Og Mandino's book, The Greatest Salesman in the World, because I realized that's the book I need to write. I need to make it a story, and that's how, if it's entertaining and I can weave in some of the rich habits into a story, people will read it. And ironically, James, I probably 20% of the people that read Rich Habits, at least on Amazon, they tell me that they always have the same complaint. Where's the research? There's not enough detail in here. And the 80% that love it are the ones that say, wow, this is great. I don't usually read self-help books, and this one I couldn't put down. So I think I did, my friend did help me get to my target audience, which is the people that don't normally read self-help books or that are tired of reading the same old self-help books. Mine's cut from a completely different cloth.
It absolutely is. And I was kind of surprised by that when I got it, because I thought it was going to be all the facts and figures and all those sorts of things. But, it's funny you mentioned Og Mandino's book, The Greatest Salesman in the World. I actually have it on my desk right now because a book that I was reading referenced it, and I had it on my shelf. So I pulled it down and was looking at a few of the chapters last night, in fact. So interesting timing on talking about that book, which was an absolutely great book. So, and really, in some ways, you couldn't have gone wrong in terms of your modeling, because both of those books that you were talking about, The Millionaire Next Door and the Greatest Salesman in the World, they're both outstanding in their own right, but they definitely hit different audiences, I think. So, I think you were right to tell a story to the people who need to hear it.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to write a follow-up book. I don't know when, probably in 2015, and I'm going to include all the research in there because I've just gotten so many people and that wanted it, and also the media seems to love the research and the stats. So I figure, well, you know what? I wrote Rich Habits. I got to that audience. Now I'm going to write the research book, and I'll get to that audience. And I've got I have a follow-up book coming out, Rich Kids. I'm trying to go after the parents and the grandparents and the kids, but I'm trying to teach all the strategies, and there's hundreds of them that I uncovered. Things like the 5-1 rule, the 80-20 rule, living below your means. The 5-1 rule is listening skills, how the wealthy they have the rich habit of listening 5 minutes for every minute that they They talk. A couple of the individuals in my study, they came up with that, and I just stole it from them. And there's how to find your main purpose in life. I think that's so important for the young generation. How to find what it is that you are passionate about, and to do that for the rest of your life. And I actually broke it down into an algorithm, a mathematical formula that is just very simple chart that you can fill out and try and find your main purpose by doing one thing every 6 months, seeing if it sticks, if the passion sticks, and if it does, that's the thing you should be doing. So there's going to be a lot of the strategies that I unearthed in the Rich Kids book, and that should come out in July sometime.
Oh, great! Well, I'll definitely be looking for that. I have a 4-year-old daughter, so yeah, I'll definitely be on the lookout for that, and make sure that I'm practicing good habits that can help raise her in the right way. So one of the things that I think is interesting about your research is the differences between the way a wealthy person and somebody who's poor spend their time. So can you walk us through a typical day for a wealthy person to start?
Yeah, sure. Wealthy people, on average, they wake up about 3 hours before they actually get to work. In fact, 44% of them did that. Only 3% of the poor did that. Now, the interesting thing is, what do they do with that 3 hours? Well, they're doing all sorts of things, James. They're doing that 30 minutes a day of reading. Some of them are preparing lessons for school that they teach at night. Some of them are doing homework for school that they go to at night school. Some of them are writing books, articles, newsletters. Some of them are preparing speeches for speaking engagements. Some of them are preparing their to-do list. Some of them are preparing for a meeting, for a board of directors meeting that might be a profit or nonprofit organization. They're doing all sorts of things in the morning before they even get to work. And then when they commute to work, they typically are listening to audio books. And in fact, there's a stat I have on that. They listen to audiobooks. I think the stat is 79% listen to audiobooks on their way to work when they commute. And that's interesting because that's time well spent. You're locked into your car or on the train or on the boat or wherever, however you get on a bus, however you get to work. And they like to use their time effectively by listening to books. And when they get to work, wealthy people, they attack their to-do list. They don't even look at their emails or their phones or voicemail until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That seems to be mid-afternoon seems to be the time when they isolate about an hour to go after their email and their voicemail. So they don't, in the morning, they don't even look at those things. They're trying to get work done and be productive. At lunch, if they take a long lunch, which is an hour or more, it's almost always some type of networking or business meeting, a lunch meeting. If they don't take a lunch, it's usually 15, 20 minutes. They either sit at their desk or they grab something quick to eat, and then they're back in the office. So during their lunch time is usually very short, or if it's long, it's used effectively. And then during the afternoon, they might have some meetings, business meetings. They all isolate some time for their voicemails and their phone calls. And then at the end of the day, they're making some phone calls to prepare for the next day's meetings or whatever. And then when they commute, go back to home, they commute back home, they're again listening to the audio books primarily. When the interesting thing is 2 out of 5 days, they're not home at night. They're out and about. They might be at board of directors meetings. Like I said, they might be teaching. They might be at school. They might be doing speaking engagements, volunteer groups. They're on committees and board of directors. And these are important activities because they're building relationships. They're showing off their skill sets at these nonprofits, and they're these relationships that they're building. They typically translate into business in some way, shape, or form. In fact, one of the interesting things I was asked. One of the questions I was asked that was very interesting, I thought, back in 2009 or 2010, one of the media asked me, well, what advice can you give to people that are unemployed? And I said, volunteer. Join some volunteer organizations. Start building relationships there. You'll find a job a lot quicker by showcasing your skill sets in a nonprofit organization, because a lot of those people on those boards and in those committees are wealthy, successful people. So that would be the typical day for a wealthy person. The poor person, they wake up and they just to give themselves enough time to get dressed, eat, and get out the door typically. When they get to work, the first thing that they do is check their email, check their voicemail, and they do that throughout the day. It's not like they break it up into one time slot. They're constantly distracting themselves with emails and voicemails and other things. And then when they always take a long lunch, the maximum lunch they can take, and typically they're talking to either their colleagues and in a lot of cases gossiping, or they're talking to the family members on the phone, or they're on social media and things like that. So it's their lunch hour is not really used effectively. It's more recreational. And then, they don't generally have a to-do list, so they're kind of winging it during the day, and they're letting events control them instead of the other way around. They're not pursuing any goals that would be on a to-do list, so they're not doing anything that would help them get closer to achieving any goals. And then when they are coming home from work, they turn on the radio and they're listening to either talk radio or music. It's about a 50-50 split there. And then when they get home, they eat, they watch TV, or they read recreationally. And one of the questions I had in one of my 20 questions is, just that. What do you do with your time between when you leave your office and you're finished with your commute and you get home? What do you do with that time? Once you get home. And the wealthy people, of course, they had all these things that they were doing. And the poor people say, well, I work really hard and I'm tired. So I eat, I watch TV, and I relax. And then they do the whole thing all over again the next day, never really getting anywhere. It's like being on a treadmill. Whereas the wealthy people are always constantly trying to pursue, move themselves forward every single day in some way, shape, or form.
Wow, that's an amazing compare and contrast. And, I'm going to challenge my listeners out there to think about their day and which one do they more directly align with. And for those of you who, maybe, your job is such that you're not checking email all day, you're working, doing something with your hands or construction or something like that, and you may not have a board of directors meetings to go to in the evening or something like that, but you can go to night school to improve yourself. You can go to something like Toastmasters, because, learning to how to control yourself and handle yourself in public with speaking and leadership, you'll pick up both of those things. So there are things you can do even if you don't have the kind of job today that requires those skill sets, to grow your skill sets into something that would maybe make you more valuable to a different type of organization. So yeah, just some food for thought there for the listeners.
That's a good point. Not everybody works out of an office, but what I found that was interesting is that it only takes one or two of these rich habits to adopt one or two of them to really transform your life. It takes time, but it is transformative. And I had one individual when I finished a speaking engagement in front of about 1,000 people. Most of them were teachers and school kids. And one individual came up to me. He was kind of a little bit discombobulated, and he said, "Look, if I drive a bus, are you telling me that if I read your book, Rich Habits, I'm going to become wealthy?" And I said, "No. But what my hope is that after you read my book, you might not want to drive a bus anymore. You might want to pursue something that you really are passionate about, that it's going to really help you in life. And I think that's an important point, because I think we get stuck in our jobs. And for those who are in a job that they don't like, whether it's in construction or driving a bus or sitting behind a desk in an office, you have time in the morning and at night, or sometime during the day, where you can pursue something that you're passionate about, where you could earn money. And it only means an hour or less a day of doing something that you're passionate about, but you have to do it every day. It's like trying to chop a tree down. It takes one chop at a time. But the important thing is, just because you're in a job, and 95% of the people are not in love with their jobs, 5% love what they do for a living, and because they love what they do for a living, they make a lot of money because they're happy at their job, and they work hard at it, because it's, in a lot of cases, it's not so much work to them. It's something they're very passionate about. You have to find that your main purpose in life. I think that's really important. And the only way to do that is by trying different things. And so if you're unhappy what you're doing, you have to build into your day some time where you can pursue outside activities that could transform you and could possibly become the thing that you do to make a living down the road.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, people, I don't think they are aware of how much they can impact their life that way. Nobody in my family had ever gone to college. I worked in construction through to my mid-20s. I was laid off from a construction job, and I made the decision at that point that I wasn't going to do that anymore, that I was going to go to college. I was going to finish college. And I was spurred to do that because I was laid off 1 month before my first son was born. So I had a reason. My why was big enough, and I did go through and finish college, and it allowed me to, have a better life for my family. So those kinds of things, after hours and before work, they can be done. I'm an example of somebody who's done it, and there are a lot more examples out there. So it's absolutely doable. So that's very good advice, Tom. The next thing I wanted to ask about was your role. You're doing all this research these days. Are you still working as a CPA? Do you still have that firm, or is this now your full-time job?
No, I still. I just came off of a tax season where I was working 80 hours a week, and I still incredibly found the time to write, I think, about a dozen articles, do about 20 media interviews during that time slot, that time frame. And it's an interesting question that you ask, because it gets to another point, which is, when you have a passion for something, and trust me, James, I can't turn the passion off for this Rich Habits. To me, this is what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. So I find the time, and I generally, when I'm working on a book or I have a project that I'm working on that's related to Rich Habits, I wake up at 4 a.m. I normally wake up at about between 5 and 5:30. That's my routine. But when I'm working on a project, I wake up at 4 a.m. And what I found is that when I'm fully engaged in a project that I'm passionate about, I don't need as much sleep. And when I'm not engaged in a project, when I'm bored, I find I need more sleep. And so I think that there's something here that is tied into our very humanity, which is we're supposed to create. We're intended to create. I call it the God gene, or the genius gene. We're supposed to do creative things. And when we're stuck, this is why construction is an interesting career, because you are actually doing something creative. And there are some people that are in construction that absolutely love what they do. And there are some people that don't. But my point is that if you find that thing that's creative, chances are it's going to be something that you really enjoy doing, and then you do well. So I think that there's an important, message I want to get here, is that we have to find those creative energies, and when we turn them on, it's like turning a switch on in your brain. And trust me, I struggle every day because I have, 6 people that work for me. I've got over 1,000 clients, and they're all pulling me in all sorts of different directions, right? So I have to find the time to do the creative stuff that really I'm passionate about and that makes me happy. And I think when you are, whatever your job is, if you find some time to do something creative on the sidelines of your life, you're going to find yourself happy. It's just going to make you happy. And let's face it, James, all of us, every single one of us is after one thing, and that is happiness. So I think that no matter how time-consuming your job is, and mine is, if you're passionate, you will find the time to do the thing that you're passionate about.
I couldn't agree more, and I'm really pleased to hear your answer to that, and that's what I thought it was going to be. But I wanted to get that out there because it's important that people understand that that people are you're practicing what you preach, and that you didn't just write this book and have these nice numbers, but that you're living this every day. So that's really important. Tom,
I'm applying these rich habits every day. I lost the first rich habit that I applied was really the weight management rich habit, and I created a lot of these rich habits before I wrote the book, and I found a what I call a weight tracking schedule that a couple of the individuals in my study were kind of using, and I kind of morphed it into something that would apply to everybody. But it helped me lose almost 40 pounds, and I've kept it off. And so that, I found that, well, okay, maybe that didn't make me money, but it did make me healthier. And when you're healthier, you have fewer sick days, you have more energy. So it does help me be more productive because it's made me healthier.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely right. That's you don't appreciate your health until you don't have it. So getting out in front of that, you have more energy, you're going to feel better. So that's really important to have that piece. There was one thing that wasn't in the book as one of the 10 habits, and so I was curious about it because I know you were talking about a lot of these people volunteer and so forth, but yeah. How does giving and generosity fit into the rich habits?
Well, a lot of the wealthy volunteer, and one of the reasons that, 72% of them volunteered 5 hours or more per month. Some of the reasons that they gave were that they wanted to give back to the community, that they felt that by volunteering they met other like-minded people. So it was, I guess you could call it, in a way, it was karma. They were giving and they were getting back. But really, it's more fundamental. It's more practiced than just a theoretical thing. When you volunteer and give of your resources, the people that benefit from it, it makes it. I call it a happiness event. It makes you happy, and you building these relationships by doing something good makes you happy and makes you more successful in life. When you're unhappy, if you're unhappy, and trust me, a lot of unemployed people are unhappy, why not volunteer? It kills two birds with one stone. Not only does it make you happy, even though it might be temporary, it does make you happy, but it also helps you build the relationships, and it might get you a job. In fact, it probably will get you a job. Most jobs come from referrals. I think it was as close as 94%. I read in some statistic that that's where jobs come from, through people that you know. So volunteering, it kills a lot of birds with one stone.
Yeah, that's good advice. And I think depending on where they volunteer, somebody who's unemployed might also meet people who are in a state maybe a little worse than where they are, and it might give them some appreciation for at least what they do have that's going on positively in their own life.
Yeah, and on that point, James, many of the wealthy people were in that position. They very often the 51% were small business owners. And, most people don't learn these rich habits from their parents, unfortunately. So they're forced to learn it through the school of hard knocks. So when you see a wealthy person, they weren't just transported from another planet to Earth as a wealthy person. They morphed or evolved into wealth, most of them. And this is an important point because they were in the same boat as these poor people. They empathize with these poor people. And that's another reason why they're out trying to help other people, because they know they've learned things in their life that they can use, these skills and the strategies and these rich habits that they can share and mentor other people. So I think that's a very good question. It's a good point.
The one thing that I think about is that so many people who don't have money, and I've when I was poor and I knew more poor people, I remember them talking about the rich and the things that they did, and it was almost like they thought the rich did what they did because they were rich, and to me, and I think your book bears it out, is that really it's the other way around. The rich do the things, they are rich because they do the things that they do. And that's the secret that people tend to miss. And that's why there are so many first generation millionaires in our country, is because they solved that equation, and they changed their work habits and their reading habits and all these things. And they made the changes in their lives necessary that allowed them to move into that wealthy category. So, I think people get that wrong all the time. So I think this book is really good at pointing out that it's the habits that matter. The results are just, they come from the habits.
Yeah, there's no question in my mind. I'll argue this with any PhD in economics from Princeton or behavioral psychology. Your habits dictate your financial circumstances in life. There is a direct cause and effect. And the thing that's interesting about it, and we talked about it at the opening of this interview, is that 40% of our daily activities are habits. That means 40% of the time we're on autopilot, unconsciously doing things. And the thing here is that if you have good daily success habits, because primarily you learn them from your parents, then you're automatically on autopilot moving towards success and wealth. But if you have bad daily habits, you're unconsciously moving towards failure and poverty. And this is why a lot of poor people scratch their head and they say, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'm poor because of my circumstances, not because of anything that I'm doing. And they couldn't be more wrong. Their circumstances. Here's the thing. Your circumstances, your poverty circumstances, are temporary, but they're made permanent by your habits. And it's an important point that I want to make. You can change your circumstances in life, but you have to change your habits, because 40% of the time you're doing things that are damaging your ability to be successful.
Wow, that was really well said, Tom. That was perfect. Tom, let me ask you, how can someone find your book? Where can they go to find your book?
Well, Rich Habits is sold wherever books are sold, but at richhabits.net, if your listeners go online there, they'll find not only my Rich Habits book, but all sorts of articles, research articles. All my research articles are on my website. There's also reports. I have, if you're a parent and you want to find out if you're raising your child to be financially successful in life, there's a quiz you can take. There's a couple of reports on how to reinvent yourself, how to make yourself unfireable. So if they go on the richhabits.net website, they can get the book and all sorts of other resources. But you can also go online at Amazon. The book it's a paperback, but there's also the different iterations of the ebook, and it's on iTunes as well. So it's pretty much everywhere.
All right. I like that. Okay. So guys out there listening, you got no excuse for not getting this book. And really, I think Tom's right. I I've been out to richhabits.net, and there is a wealth of information out there. So I would actually encourage you to go there, take a look around, and then you can buy the book right there while you're there. Tom, as we close off here, can you offer a few tips or strategies to help the audience, from starting where they are right now?
Yeah, one thing I will tell you is if you really want to change your life, the first rich habit, I call it the reinvention habit. It's just get out a pad of paper and be brutally honest with yourself and list all of your bad habits, all the habits that you think could possibly be holding you back in life. And in the book, I explain how you can take those bad habits, those poverty habits, and transform them into rich habits. For example, if you don't exercise, that's a poverty habit. Your new rich habit would be, I exercise 20 minutes today. If you smoke cigarettes, your new rich habit is, I did not smoke a cigarette today. If you don't read, your new rich habit is, I read 20 to 30 minutes today of educational stuff. I think that trying to get into the habit of saving 10 to 20% of your net income, not easy to do when you're in your 40s and your 50s, but if anybody out there that's listening is in their 20s or their 30s, it's a lot easier to do in your 20s and 30s, trust me. So if you can get into that habit of saving, it forces you to live below your means when you put aside 10 or 20% because you're forced to live on 80 or 90% of whatever it is you make. So by default, you're living below your means. So those are a couple of tips.
Fantastic. Well, Tom, I really appreciate you spending the time on my show. I know the listeners have gotten a wealth of information. I'm really going to continue to encourage them to pick up the book and give it a read and to start to implement some of these rich habits. And when they do and they have the success, whether it's weight loss or job changes or income, I want them to let me know. And by extension, I'm going to let you know. So I really appreciate you being on. And again, I think this has just been an invaluable episode.
I really enjoyed it, James. I thank you so much for having me on your show.
All right. Everybody, go out to richhabits.net and take a look around and check out Tom's information, his research, and again, pick up the book while you're out there. Hey everyone, welcome back. Since I know this episode went a little long, I want to be a little brief in my wrap up here, but I do want to share a few things. I think the information shared in Rich Habits, the book, and at richhabits.net can really change your life. I think just doing a couple of the things that are referenced in that book can make a huge difference in your life. And I want to basically contrast this and compare it to a quote that Tony Robbins gives, and it's one that I've always thought made a lot of sense to me, and I've tried to do it in my life. And it reads like this: if you want to be successful, find someone who's achieved the results you want and copy what they do, and you'll achieve the same results. And I think that's really an important message here, that we can change our lives, and we know, if we know who we want to be, then we can find out who we ought to be modeling. And what I would say about Tom's book is, if you want to be successful, if you want to be productive, if you want to be rich, then you need to model the behavior that's in that book and on his website, because he's already done the work of finding out who these other people are and how they live. And now it's just your job to change your habits, to start to model what they do. There's also another Tony Robbins quote I'm going to throw out here as well. And that is, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always gotten. So it's really up to you now. The ball's in your court as a listener. You can choose to live as you always have and to get the results you've always gotten, or you can choose to model the behavior you find in this book, Rich Habits, and change your life. And I would really like for those of you out there to read this book and then let me know about the results. Read the book, start to practice some of the habits that you think are important to changing your life or to getting you to where you want to be, and then come back to me in 30 days and let me know the impact. First I would encourage you just to reach out to me on Twitter and let me know that you bought the book and that you're using it. And then 30 days out, come back to me and let me know how this has impacted you, because I think it'll be something that you will all be surprised by how much of a change it can make in your life. go out to cashcarconvert.com/029 and you can leave those comments there. You can also just reach out to me on Twitter and let me know as well. And I love hearing from you guys, so please do that. The other thing I'm going to mention here as I wrap up is just to let you know that I'm still holding to the 50 count for ratings and reviews. When I get to 50 in iTunes, then I'm going to do a drawing of the people who have given me ratings and reviews, and I will then offer up a signed copy of Smart Money, Smart Kids by Dave Ramsey and Rachel Cruz. I think this is another book that can really be a life-changing book. And I guess for those of you out there listening, you can tell I think reading can be a real impactful thing on your life. So I encourage you to read a lot of nonfiction and expand your brain, expand your horizons. Well, that's all I've got for this week. Again, I hope you enjoyed the show with Tom. I really so much appreciated him coming on. It was a real blessing, and I hope you were blessed by the message today. Thank you very much, and I will be talking to you next week.